Hello and welcome to episode 15 of The Dive. On last week's episode, we previewed Rift Rivals, and we were right about everything. Actually, if you go back and watch it, it's incredible. No,
Just check about.
yeah, it was a little off, but we're going to have the benefit of hindsight and kind of recap the Rift Rivals from across the world.
And we had to do it from the past. We didn't see, that P1 had won those
Enough
extra games.
excuses, Azael. We're also going to move on to big patch, actually, 7.14. Quite a few changes that will probably affect competitive.
Yeah, I definitely think they will. And then, as always, it's going to talk about NA LCS coming back this week.
Yeah, but first off, we're going to do NA versus EU.
Got to start with global news, Jet. There we go.
That is the global news.
That's what
NA
I'm
was
saying.
12-6 in group stage and 3-0 against Unicorns of Love in the end. Even with all of our pre-tournament excuses of jet lag and sickness and new patch,
Even
and
with,
having the
like,
practice.
added on to stomping them, we also still have those excuses being valid. Cloud9 got super sick. The jet lag was very real. Yeah, it was pretty big.
It was actually kind of funny talking to some of the P1 guys before they had played. They're like, we're screwed. We're so tired. We're
And they
all
actually
jet
worked, 'cause
lagged.
they had to play the Sunday LCS and then fly out a day later
Yeah,
even.
They thought they were going to get slammed.
Well, okay, where to start? Why? Why was the pre-tournament expectation so different than the results?
I think honestly, like, we saw that there are answers to the play styles and stuff that some of these European teams are using. G2, to be fair, was not having their strongest split, right? Like, they're doing a lot worse than they were anyway, so I think expectations were lower for them. But for Fnatic and UOL, we're kind of looking at them. They dismantle all the European teams, and it's hard to make the prediction that it's like, well, if they smash all the European teams, you're essentially saying that all of ULCS sucks if we're predicting that NA is just going to come in there and dismantle them and make it look like, it's a playstyle that doesn't work. And that's essentially what happened is that they showed answers to these playstyles. Fnatic's playstyle did not work. UOL's like crazy aggression and stuff, while they had some successful moments, it didn't work, right? It just didn't show in the same way that I think it showed in the EU LCS. And I guess that for now, at least, the NA LCS had a better read on perhaps the meta and actually how to play against those teams.
I think one of the biggest things that affected the pre-tournament expectations were the standings going into it and the teams that we were actually sending. One of the biggest factors was the turmoil that we're having in North America. The rise of CLG and Immortals after the big trade caused both those teams to rise up very quickly. And that, has to come with someone else falling down. Cloud9 and TSM, had to scrap their way through the beginnings. And we're not even sending our top three teams anymore, as Phoenix One fell all the way down to, tied for last place there for a while.
Yeah, well, the nice thing for NA that I think did contribute is, right, Phoenix One resurged essentially right before they attended Rift Rivals. They were third place in the spring split, not too far.
They resurged by beating Immortals.
They beat Immortals, right? If we're saying that we weren't sending our top teams, and then Phoenix One beat Immortals, and then I think they also beat Envy or someone towards the bottom of the standings that week. TSM also won like 5 or 6 matches in a row, aside from the loss to Cloud9, and then Cloud9 was the lowest performing team. So I do feel like there was definitely some almost over-indexing on Worlds results or even G2's best of 5 against W8 MSI, which swung our vision of the leagues a little bit off. Not to mention the tremendous trash talk that was coming out of the European region, right? I feel like all of it impacted the way we were seeing it, because it made us look past the things like 7-1 in the past year and a half, or all the infrastructure upgrades NA has made. Over the
that's
past
even reaching
year.
further in the past. Then, if you're talking about made us look past the even longer history that's further ago, I don't know about.
To me, it's like you're talking about standings. UOL was first in their group.
Yeah.
Fnatic is first in their group, right? It's
I think
recency.
That's huge
I think that was a big thing. Like going into the event, I essentially, after P1 won their last 2 games, going into it, I was like, okay, they could maybe get a couple wins.
Win a couple games.
I think TSM and C9 are going to do probably fine, but I think Fnatic's going to win, right? That's essentially where I was sitting going into the event, because Fnatic had just looked better, right? But it's very hard to actually compare. It's not comparing apples to apples, because Fnatic is not playing TSM every week and having that record. Fnatic is playing the other teams in their region having that record, and I think the real test actually of the strength of the EU LCS and of the strength of the regions is, can Fnatic go back to the EU LCS and just do the same thing and continue to win? Because if they can, that's very concerning for the EU LCS. But maybe, hey, they just need to adapt and kind of show some of the answers that some of the NA teams did. Because
I don't think that they will.
You don't think they'll even try?
Those players are traumatized after Rift Rivals. Did you talk to any of them? I talked to a couple of them at the studio, as they're walking out. The European is in upheaval right now. The European LCS.
I mean, even talking with Trashy sometimes towards the analyst desk, like, I mean, on air, you could see how they're just like, wow, this happened. Like, we felt, Kobe mentioned he felt bad with how sad everyone was on the
Not bad. I didn't feel bad. I felt a little guilty.
You felt guilty,
yeah.
right? Because every analyst desk was invariably like, one of us shocks, like 2 European pro player
you're
guests.
Sitting there, you're all happy.
Oh man, Europe sucks. And you're just like, yeah, sure. I mean, I'd rather say NA is good, but you're going to be sad right now, so I'm going to try not to gloat.
And your thing that you brought up earlier too about all the trash talk beforehand, I think that was actually a pretty big factor too. Obviously we are more critical of our own league heading into it, so that was some of those expectations. But also, like if someone is trash talking you for that long, with that intensity, then some of it was kind of start to seep into your mentality, right?
Kobe.
It's like abusive relationship. They keep telling you you're
maybe
dumb.
She's right.
Maybe you start to think you're dumb.
You know what's actually, to be fair though, I also want to talk about the fact that I think the NA teams just objectively performed well. Like I think TSM actually just played well and played well as a team, and it's hard to know how much is because of the competition, how much is just because them playing. I mean, like Sven is like, how come you could play all these junglers that weren't really seeing? He's like, well, because these junglers suck. So I mean, but how much is it actually that, and how much is it they just perform well? Because I think TSM looked better than they had all split at Rift Rivals. I thought they just as a team performed very well.
That's why I think to your earlier point about, will Fnatic go back to the USS and do the same thing? I think it's even more interesting. Will the teams come back from Rift Rivals and look better and keep those improvements? Or was it because the European teams had worse vision, they had worse macro game, they were, more indecisive? Junglers is actually a very big topic because our junglers were super proactive and very successful with a lot of early games, whereas theirs were not.
Yeah.
What's it going to look like?
I got one little thing, but I'll let you get into it. But like, I don't think that there's any guarantees because look at MSI, right? Both CLG, best international performance for NA ever, come back, doing awful in NA. G2, probably, best recent international performance you could at least say.
3-3.
And then they come back, they're sucking, right? So it's international success does not equate to regional success, whether it's getting cocky, getting lazy, different circumstances, different metas, whatever you want to say, it doesn't always equate.
Yeah, and there were totally different teams. And one thing I will say is this was a 4-day event with a 3-day group stage where teams played 2 best-of-1s a day. So even with that, like we're trying to say these results showed it could have been a little bit of random variability. But with it, no, there is. I think there's random variables within there.
There is,
with
but
how
it was
decisive
15-6.
the victory was.
It was pretty decisive. And it was clearly better than EU, but like...
And a couple of those EU wins were dicey.
Yeah, a couple of the NA wins were dicey too.
Yep.
So, but like you saw the Drake stats, for instance.
Yeah.
It was like 40 to 10.
Stats.
Vision stats placing about 15 to 20% more control wards. Like it definitely felt like NA was playing in a stylistically just better way than the European teams. But I don't want to... We've done this before where you have like an IEM Katowice when TSM won the World Championship in 2015 was a similarly lengthed event to something like Rift Rivals. So I want to make sure that we're not like crowning NA greater than EU because by the time Worlds rolls around, could still
That's the whole point of the event.
We are crowning them. They're crowned.
They crowned.
The crown's on their head, Jack.
They did it for us. Champions. Yeah.
I have to say though,
the event was largely considered competitive scrims, if that makes sense, right? So I'm curious to see. I know it, from the
how this EU cast
I disagree with a lot of what you're saying. First of all, that's why you look beyond the stats, and that's why you look beyond just the results
look to
of
the
the
greatness
game.
of our region.
If you watch the actual how the games played out, North American teams had control 90% of the time in all the games. Even the ones that they did lose, as you're saying, like the European wins, they were behind in gold literally every single early game.
Yeah.
Like,
but does that mean that come Worlds, the same thing will happen again?
No, because it never means
that's essentially what I'm saying. Is like don't over extrapolate.
Well, it's just like just because Worlds 1 year we perform doesn't mean we're going to perform the next year, right?
Yeah, you can't cheapen what they did though.
Yeah,
in saying
correct.
So right now, North America is
think
certainly much stronger than Europe. I think we can say that. G2, I expect them to be really good come Worlds. I don't think that this is the level that they've shown, and they've been very good for a long time. So I'm expecting G2 to bounce back and be a top team that is as good or better than what we're sending from North America come Worlds, right? Like they're a team that has shown that. Maybe that's not going to happen, but they have months to prepare and the meta changes, right? So we'll see how these teams can adapt. You don't think Fnatic's going to try the same style? Maybe they can just play a standard style and just be that good, right? Like they have strong players.
Yeah, I think at least SOAS is going to like force them them to change the type of play that they have. I do think that Reckless will continue to use these like hipster AD carries.
You don't blame him for saying he's never going to play, like, I can't play this dog champion against good teams.
Dude,
Shen's the second most picked ban champion in the world for top lane. Like, are you telling me that champion is the reason you lost?
I can understand the frustration because, of course it's tilt, but I can understand the frustration because Shen loses like every single lane matchup in the whole game. And if you feel like you're better than your opponent in the 1v1, I'm not saying it's true, but if you feel like that, there's nothing you can do to carry the game really in a 1v1 scenario, right? So it's like, I can understand being like, I'm way better than this guy. Now I'm just going to play the carries. I'm going to smash him,
you
right?
Can carry with Shen.
Maybe he should try
not in a 1v1.
Correct. But like, that's not the game. You play team fights.
But it is a lot of the time.
But,
is that you just get locked in these 1v1s and you're just pushed under your turret.
Maybe he should try some jacks like my boy Hooney.
That worked out
Speaking of which, do you want to talk about the other Rift Rivals? Because I thought they results were actually.
Do we want to talk about
really
individual teams at all from Rift Rivals from NAEU stuff, or do we want to just go straight into LCK?
We're going to talk about the NA teams, like in the NA LCS section. Fnatic Tilt is one thing. I think we could go into to the LCK LPL because the same type of like reactions to results. This was far crazier to me than NA beating AU because we talked in the Rift Rivals preview.
Flame quick shot.
Like as much as EU was favored. And we even said that EU will probably win Rift Rivals. We were like, we would not be super surprised if NA was able to win this because the regions are actually pretty close. We're thinking ahead. LPL, LCK though, it's a foregone conclusion that LCK was going to win.
You expect LCK, like all formats aside, theirs was a more random format, I think, than the NA one, right? This was not SKT playing a best of 5 to finish it, in which case SKT probably wins every single time. But even with this format, I would bet on LCK 9 out of 10 times. Yeah. Right? Like I think that they...
What happened on that one time? You had
the one time they lost.
One time it happened.
Weird breakfast or something.
The difference in the formats...
I'm going to go with LPL.
Yeah.
NAEU was just like a big group stage into a single
I'm saying they
team
play it 10 times, Kobe. China wins once, and that's what happened.
You said 9 out of 10 times you would bet on LCK. So one time you're
not going to bet on LCK.
Right, you know what I mean.
Yeah. Now, yeah.
All right, I was really hungover or something, Kobe.
I'm really glad we spent the time to talk about
we got to clarify that.
Difference in the format, for those of you that just watched the NAEU format, there were 3 regions that all sent 4 teams. So the group stage, like, you didn't actually see that big of a spread of teams playing each other. Like LCK, I believe, only dropped 2 games in the group stage. I think Samsung lost one, or KT lost one of the games, and then I think MVP lost one of the games.
LPL sucked in group stage.
Yeah, I mean, EDG didn't win a single game in group stage. Then EDG opens up the best of 5. They beat Samsung. Then SKT opens up against Team WE. They lose. KT's the one winner, and then MVP comes out and they lose to RNG. So it's over because they were doing that format where everyone has to play everyone else in the best of 5, and then you have like what's the name of it if it goes to 5 games?
Ace match.
It's an ace match where you just pick your best.
You can bring
team
SKT out again or whatever.
But even that, like, it is still in essence LPL beating the LCK in a best of 5. It's just a bunch of best of 1s in sequence. So still hugely unlikely. But why do you think it happened?
I mean, I think that the teams prepared well, and I think that they just played super well on the days. I also think that there's some picks and stuff that are less consistent. Like SKT did play Jax, if I recall correctly.
Yep,
and
Jax played Casio and Fed First Blood and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Jax is a pick where it's like it can be very hit or miss. Like if you can't, it's not like a standard team fighting like most safe thing. Like maybe they're trying some stuff. Maybe they think it was actually the best pick that they could do in this scenario. I personally think that it's like J4 and Jax is what they were picking. It's actually really hard for Jax early, so then you're already locking yourself into a situation where you have to like go really late, and then the fact that like Faker's getting killed and some things are going bad means the game can snowball out of control much more easily because Jax is a pick that can't just like group and just team fight your way out of that very well. So I think that it's partially picks. I think it's really good preparation. Hearing about some of like the LPL coaches are all working together and talking, okay, what team actually matches up best with each play style, and that's how they're going to target it and stuff. So I think it really was truly like the Rift Rivals thing, and that's why I think that format is really cool.
Yeah, and the other thing is that, coming out, yes, the Korean teams are like, the fans are being super mean basically now, and a lot of excuses or reasons and things are coming out. But another one was that the LCK teams or the LCK coaching staff or something didn't really want to divert a lot of time to like paying attention or wasting time on this event, and they kept talking about how LCK is the more important thing and stuff like that. So then you start questions of how much did they concentrate on it, how much did they practice or prep like that.
And I think you can ask the same questions like technically over either Rift Rivals, right? Like whether it's NAEU or whether it's LPL, LCK. I do really love that format though.
I think it's way more exciting.
Although it does make the group stage a little bit irrelevant, like essentially the group stage seeded the LCK into the final because the LMS had to play the LBL beforehand. But what happened is essentially LCK and LPL played the group stage about as one-sidedly as NAEU would have, but then it would have been a world where UOL wins the final over TSM like 3-1 is essentially what happened in the LPL LCK thing. And if that happened, like if we're looking at that from the outside, we would have been like Battle of the Atlantic all over again, where one team wins like half of the tournament, the other team ends up walking away with the trophy. I kind of feel like that's what happened here, right? LCK still did win the group stage very decisively, and then they ended up losing the final. So I think it makes Worlds way more exciting, but I don't want to crown LPL the greatest region in the world or anything crazy like that.
No, I mean, you certainly can't do that, and certainly like it's odds-on favorites for Korea at Worlds, etc. Right? You know, in a longer form format, you're going to bet on those teams, and it's also something you have to keep in mind where it's. I think this is a good reminder. Sometimes everyone kind of like correlates SKT success with LCK success, right? Like the LCK is not 10 SKTs, right? There's one team that's that. And then there teams like MVP and stuff are not nearly on the level of SKT and even Samsung, in my opinion.
The top teams right now are very significantly good though. Like the top probably like 5.
So who are the people that you put on that level? Because right now, to me, it's like I can see like SKT, Samsung. I can see maybe like KT or something. Yeah, like those three. But I think there's a big drop off past those personally. All I'm saying is that it's like there's a lot of teams, I think top teams from around the world that can match up with like an MVP or something like that, right? It's not the same as having to play SKT 5 times, and I think that's something that people should keep in mind. While it's clearly the best region, they have the best teams.
Oh, really? They're not all SKT?
No, but I mean,
some of them
people get in that mind, right? It's like people get in that mindset. People talk about you see comments where it's like, oh, first place NA, oh, you wouldn't even be 10th place in LCK, you'd be challenger. But it's like that's trash. That's wrong. Like there's the top teams from around the world can compete with these teams. There's a couple that are clearly at a higher tier, but it's not the whole league.
I want to close it off with a quick shot tweet. What's more unbelievable based on pre-tournament expectations?
Yeah, me and Isaac were talking about
winning Rift Rivals or LPL winning Rift Rivals. Are you kidding me? It's clearly LPL.
That's what I responded to the tweet. I'm like, anyone who's voting for NA is trolling. Like clearly, NA beating EU. Yes, it was an upset. We all predicted that EU was going to win, but this was like 55-45, right? Like LCK to LPL is like 90-10.
The thing to me, that actually shows how much the mindset of not even just European fans, but like the European casters, how dead set they were on like they are so much better that they thought the gap between NA and EU was comparable to the gap between Korea
and anyone else.
And anyone else.
Quickshot does like to say things just to incite conversation, like pretty often. I think we're getting incited.
Anyways, this one triggered us.
Yeah. And to be fair, it's like he's a European caster. Most of his followers are going to be European, so they're going to be more likely to be salty.
Yeah. Will Phoenix 1 win Worlds? I think is
that's very clear. That's what we've learned from Rift Rivals. They're 4-2. LCK lost at theirs, so. There you go.
Moving on to the meta and state of the game, we're going to be talking about patch 7.14 and quick jump onto Urgot because the rework was announced and we got to see basically the kit and the videos. What do you guys think?
I think it looks pretty cool. I actually think it's really fun, and one of the things I've been noticing with some of the newer champions is it's like the thematic, like the feeling of the character. I think is more there. Like it feels really cool. It's like this like horror monster thing. Like shoots out his all. He's pulling you into the chains. He's gonna eat you up. Like I think it's really cool that they're coming up with these creative ways and stuff. And I am constantly surprised that they keep coming up with these really cool ideas for the champions. That being said, as far as the actual like mechanics of it, this whole thing where you have to like shoot off all your legs and walk in a circle and stuff, like. I hope very much that the character is not balanced around you actually being able to shoot all your legs off and like walk in a fat circle around someone, because that is never going to happen.
So they said specifically they do not expect you to get that off.
Yeah,
it may be a few. They expect a few of them, not all of them.
Like, well, also it does like reduce damage when you hit them with more than one at once. So like it's not like a Fiora Grand Challenge or something where you get this huge reward because all your legs have blown up or have been shotguns.
You shoot off the final leg, a nuke explodes. You win the game.
I do feel like when we talked about Kane of, do we think this kit can fit in competitive? We're like, yes, it has all these unique things that make it fit in competitive. I don't see the same thing with the Urgot kit as far as like, unless he's a tremendously good lane bully in the top lane, I don't see him bringing something like super special to a team that would force you to put him in competitive unless he's OP.
So I actually do see him as someone who could play top lane, because even though Urgot top has not played consistently, there are matchups that people will play this, and it's actually horrible to play against even current Urgot top. And if this is someone who, like, I'm looking at sick gank assist with the charge and the flip, like, you have slow with your Q, you can flip them in, your ult like is slowing them, and as far as like team fighting and stuff, like, it seems good engage. It seems like you cannot like Tom Kench eat someone out of the Urgot ult. So if Urgot can build like this like bruisery build and kind of ult someone and you can burst them down, you cannot save that person unless you can kill off the Urgot. So like, I see it as someone who, if his lane is strong enough, he could have like the engage and the power to actually do some team fighting. But I definitely do not see this as an AD carry. I see this as a top laner who's going to be able to bully certain picks and maybe take over the game like through that style. You know, it's like you bully lane, then you go to team fights.
Yeah, I always like to wait and see until we get more details and actually.
It depends on the numbers and the scaling.
So
of course.
I mean, one trend that we've obviously noticed with any major reworks and new champions is there'll usually be a point in time in which they have high enough numbers that we'll see them in pro, but it's just a matter of will the kit fit. Overall, probably better than the old Urgot, I think, from what I'm seeing. I have an affinity for the long skill names and the 34 syllables that come with Urgot, but other than that, I think Shotgun needs a little
34. Okay.
Yeah. There were 2 champions with more syllables in their skill names. Can you guess the 2?
No. I'm not even
You're not even going to try?
It's not even a fun game.
Heimerdinger and Jace. Heimerdinger cheats because he's got skills like H28 Evolution Grenade or something. And then Jace has 2 forms, and like Mercury Cannon Stance or something is like 1/2 of his ultimate. Anyway.
That's it. Let's get to the rest of the patch.
Baby.
I had to follow that up because it was a cast with me and Captain Flowers, and we never got to it.
Okay.
This is now the time.
Right,
patch 714. What are you most excited to see?
I want to talk a bit about this because you guys have been triggering me because they weren't allowing me.
You get to go first. Now you get your time. This is your time to talk.
Yeah, set the stage for
okay,
why
so
you're
let him talk.
Essentially, we come in on these days and we do not try to have the conversations about the stuff like that we're going to talk about on the show. So it's like a first time through. But they kept saying, like I said, oh, I think 714 is crazy. It's going to be this really big patch, right? It's going to be nuts. And they're like, nah, it's not that big. And then I started to respond like, oh, save it for the show. Save it for the show. And they've been doing this to me all day.
We're on the show now. Go.
We're on the show.
You're wasting time.
Here we go.
Why is it such a huge disruptive patch?
I think that the changes to the individual champions are actually like really big as far as like when you look at Garen, when you look at Cho'Gath, when you look at Singe, Diana, like all these things are like actual like massive changes, like almost near like little like update levels of actual like change to the characters. But I also think that the lethality change, the fact that lethality, Tarek is also another really big one. I think he's going to be huge. But
that's what I was going to talk about.
The lethality change makes it so it's scaling off your level as opposed to the opponent's level. So for assassins and stuff in the mid lane, I actually think this is absurd. Like I think that it puts it at a level where as a solo laner, you are going to be so over leveled on people like supports where it's like it's almost impossible to not one shot like the AD carry and the support and stuff, like because you have a level advantage, like actually buffs lethality quite a lot. Like you can get to a point where you have like more lethality, like you're doing like true damage almost essentially with lethality runes. Like I think that is really big. And I also think that Bramble Vest changes like the landscape of the game so much for tanks. Like when you look at so many of these matchups that tanks have just been trashing in top lane.
Like I like how you corrected yourself now to not the full Thornmail, just the Bramble Vest.
Right,
I kept correcting you to make sure that the small piece is the big game
I'm gonna change it back. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, like this item. So it's about the tanks being able to apply grievous wounds, right? Like when you look at Fiora, when you look at Riven, when you look at all these champions who can bully you through lifesteal, it's like it gets to a point where tanks cannot fight back, and that's always this break point that we talk about for a lot of split pushers. That may not exist anymore. Like it may not get to the point where it's like, oh, they hit their 3 items, you have 5, you lose anymore. So I think that as far as like actual like meta shifting, I think assassins could be much bigger. I think all these individual champions have a chance to have a huge resurgence, and tanks, just from this one itemization change, could be pushed heavily back into the meta.
Yeah, let's try and break it down so we're talking about like 1 or 2 things at a time.
Yeah.
The main thing about me saying this wasn't like a huge patch is we've had like the Cinderhulk patch last year, the lane swap patch we've had.
Let's also clarify. Isaac said
King.
this is the biggest patch we have ever had.
No, that's what we were true. That is
literally the exact words that you used.
I said besides class
updates
or like mid-season or end of season changes and stuff. I'm talking about like middle of the season random patch.
I think Cinderhulk, Blade of the Ruined King, and lane swaps are all more disruptive than this patch for sure. And so let's talk about Bramblevest first. I'm actually going to be on the anti-Bramblevest hype train based on reading it because yes, I think you can rush it, but I think the long-lasting effects are greatly overstated. Cloth armor plus 300 gold is not actually a very gold efficient item based on the stats. It's like 77% gold efficiency with cloth armor plus cloth armor for the armor it gives you. And then you're basically paying 300 gold for 5 armor and the healing debuff plus the 20 magic damage when someone hits you. I don't think that's super rushable on as many people as we think it is.
Kobe's looking like he disagrees.
Yep. Kobe disagrees. He wants to rush it on every top lane melee champion because that's theoretically the people who would build it. It would either be a jungler who runs bottom lane.
So let me give you some numbers, buddy.
Did you run them?
Huh? Yeah.
Run some numbers?
So, like you said, it's only 200 gold for Executioner's Calling.
300 gold.
And
it's 1 second of healing debuff.
200. It costs 900 for the item.
Cloth armor plus 300 gold. I'm reading the patch notes right now.
700.
What?
It's 700 gold worth of armor. The item costs 900.
Yeah. Okay.
So 200 gold for Executioner's Calling and
20 reflection.
Don't forget this magic damage that you're reflecting. Just for some context here.
Yeah, like what is 25
If you're
damage?
buying an on-hit magic damage, which would be for an attack speed person, but that's the only thing I have because that's all we have in the game. Besides this, getting hit thing. That's 25 gold per one. So this is, if it was on hit, if you're the one doing the hitting,
to get
this will be 500 gold worth of on hit damage right there. That's more than cost advantage. But you get free Executioner's Calling. So
1 second of healing debuff is much different than 3 to 8. Because Morellonomicon lasts for what, like 8 seconds, and Executioner's Calling lasts for 3. So 1 second is definitely going to be a lot less.
It's free.
But it's free. You're saying basically the Grievous Wounds is free. Yeah. And then what is the value of Grievous Wounds in the early game for 1 second?
I think it's actually really high. I think it's insane in top lane. So like there's
against Renekton, Fiora,
against almost
Zach,
anything.
Mundo.
Against Jace, against
most champions heal now.
Jace? What's he healing off of?
The thing is, it's Doran's Blade. Like even just your even just your regen, like your actual HP per 5, like health in top lane. That is why Doran's shield became so big. Like it's actually absurd how much of a difference it makes for champions who are consistently harassing you. So as a tank, you sit there and you just get bopped. Like you just get hit, you just take it, right? Like they can actually lose trades now from hitting you plus range minions. There's a point where you can actually like
I'm converted from the damage that you're going to get, but the 1 second of healing debuff to reduce Doran's Blade healing by half, that's like a total throwaway to me.
I think it actually makes a bigger difference than you think. Like over the course of like 5 minutes of laning, if they're hitting you consistently, I think it's actually like a significant amount of like health that is lost. I'm not saying it's like thousands of health, but like a couple hundred health over your
hit, though, right?
Yeah, but like if you're there for like 5 minutes or whatever in lane and things like this, like I think it builds up a fair bit. And that's not even talking about the champions like Aatrox or like Fiora or the ones who have massive amounts of healing in their kits.
Yeah, and it's gonna reduce.
I think it hurts champions like Fiora for sure because she gets a big health proc every time she hits a vital, right?
And
I think Fiora's
and people who build lifesteal, like
nurse the Fiora, I think is what's gonna kill her, not this thing.
This helps a lot though for tanks into Fiora. Like even with just this, I think you would have a chance later in the game against the Fiora. I'm talking about fighting into.
Did you see the actual nerfs they're doing to her?
Yeah.
They're big.
Yeah, both of them are really big.
Yeah,
I think Fiora. I may not have to ban Fiora anymore.
All right, let's try to keep it organized.
Bramblevest. I accept
converted?
Not 100%.
Okay.
You guys are saying it's super OP. I say it's buyable.
Okay, so you moved. You moved up though. Okay.
I think it's comically OP.
Yeah. All right. Maybe I'll say slightly above average. I mean, I hope we're not doing the whole EU is going to smash NA thing.
Slowly moving the needle here.
We're slowly moving the needle.
Yeah, we'll convince them.
It'll happen. I'm a skeptical.
All right, so we're done with Brambleback. Let's move on because you did a bunch of them in the bundle there, Azale. I want to do lethality. Yeah, I wanted us to respond to lethality because this is the one that I do think is a pretty big part of the patch. And I saw a couple of guys on the patch team say that it would be slight buffs for attack damage assassins, but as far as looking at the value of specifically for me, Dustblade is so much better right now. The increase in lethality plus it being off your solo lane level are very, very big in the effectiveness of that. The build path for this thing is the biggest thing. Why I would never build it on, jungle champions. The build path is actually, it's actually amazing now. And especially that's important for assassins because sometimes you're against a control mage, you get pushed out, you have to go back from your lane at really awkward times sometimes. And very rarely are you going to be like, I'm going to get a BF sword right now.
Anytime you can get CDR, like CDR is like such a sought after stat. Like the fact that it's a cheaper item to complete, the build path is better, the CDR, like everything about this item is pretty nuts.
And to me, this is like the clear winner. And I'm like ready to crown it. I'm going to buy one of these, every time I have to play a solo laner.
That's what I was going to say. How do you feel about lethality in these items for a jungler, right? Because the jungler is not always as over leveled.
I'm already biased because I'm a Cinder Hulk jungler basically, so I'll probably stick with mostly tanks. Hecarim, I would probably get the Ghostblade still, but yeah, for the tank junglers, I still think jungling is optimal there. As you said, junglers are lower level, so it's not quite as good. I still think it is good, like if you're playing Shaco or something, then I'll still get it on my Smurf or whatever. The other thing though,
play Shaco on your main. Duskblade Rush?
Until I get my Smurf up to like Diamond 1 or something, no. The proc, though, on it as well is the last thing I want to mention for this because, as you said, it's a cheaper overall item. And the vision denial and the damage proc to me are also extremely good on this item. So, I think it's definitely going places.
Yeah, Pantheon is a champion that I see becoming a little bit OP with these items because he's actually already a champion who's kind of sleeper OP in at least the solo queue world.
Solo queue is not even sleeper OP, he's just OP.
Maybe this actually brings Pantheon into competitive, right?
Yeah. I mean, we saw it once as a counter pick, and I think he is very good as counter pick into certain matchups. I don't think that Pantheon, I think, is not a champion you really want to just blind pick and stuff. But I think as a counter pick, I think he could be in competitive for sure.
For him specifically, I already sent feedback to the Balance team about it, that he's probably an abuse case for this.
Yeah, I'm excited for these because I think Duskblade is an item we haven't seen before. But at the same time, if the excitement means this dude pops out of stealth and kills your level 4 AD carry because he's level 6 and you roam down, I'm going to be a little bit less excited because that's actually not a game style that I'm super excited to see.
Yeah, so I mean, that's basically just talking about these. These are things that I think can shift the whole the landscape of the meta and the game itself quite a bit for a lot of champions, right? Both as a playing for and playing against case. So that's why I think this is such a big patch. But that's not even getting into some of these individual champions. Just some of the. I mean, I know you said you want to talk about Tarek.
Yeah, let Jack choose something that he's interested in for this patch.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just go into some of the actual champion changes. Right. I wanted to talk about Tarek, mainly because I think these buffs are pretty interesting, specifically his Q going up to 5 charges and gaining a stack of Q every time you're getting an auto attack off. In a world where melee supports are kind of coming back, I think Tarek's going to be the best team fighter out of all of them. And then if he also has better sustain, I think it pushes him right into the meta.
And even just early laning, his dazzle damage, his E damage went up 40 at rank 1, which is actually very significant. His heal does more and also scales off maximum health as opposed to bonus health. Yeah. That's going to be a lot more powerful.
Dazzle gaining 40 damage at rank 1
is insane.
Means you just have instant kill pressure in the lane.
So it's
flashy and then the guy dies.
Yeah, I actually think that Tarek is going to be super strong. As far as that, but some of these changes are nuts. Looking at Garen, the size of some of these changes. So Perseverance, essentially his passive, got a bit of a rework. So instead of it scaling from 2 to 4 to 10 at levels 1, 11, 16, now at level 1, it's 2% per 5, and then 8% per 5 of maximum health at level 11. And then one of the big changes is when you're below 25 or 50% health, it actually doubles essentially how much regen you're getting. So not only you're getting essentially double the regen for laning trades, and then you're putting them in this world where you can do these really aggressive trades and then heal up. And then on top of that, so the E change doesn't really matter. It's a tiny bit more AD scaling, but your W gives you a small burst of 60% damage reduction and tenacity, 0.75 seconds. So that's small, but if you can use this well in a trade, your trading in lane, I think gets so much better, and your regen gets so much better. If you cannot constantly stay on top of the Garen and actually keep his passive off, I feel like Garen could actually be really good in a lot of lane matchups because Garen actually can be somewhat oppressive in some melee matchups already. This I think is pretty nuts, and like just the size of changes like this, I think can really change the game a lot. Like Singe is not something that I play, but like the fact that his W is now root, that's pretty crazy too.
I think Singe is way more important than Garen.
That's fair.
Like
Do you think these are
Garen's
buffs
not going to
for
change
Singe?
the way that the game is played.
No.
Garen is a very simple champion.
No. He's not going to change the way the game's played.
But the biggest and most interesting thing to me about Singe is that the mega adhesive now is grounding, and that is just so big of an improvement. Whenever you add utility like that to a type of champion like this, being able to use that, even he has viability in team fight. He never had viability with the team. He was 100% split pusher all the time.
Although
so now,
not
only
with
can you
story and stuff, you actually could do like engagey type like team fight stuff more recently.
Not only now can you do the split push though, but you can catch up to people with the mega adhesive. People can't flash out of it. Like he is having that one change is so big. Not to mention the rest of the adjustments that they're trying to make it so that you can feel good about buying AP and stuff like that.
I think the make or break on Singed is whether or not the math works out with the mana conversion versus all the other adjustments they did, because he was pretty much the last dude who had true like stat conversion passives on him, and he ended up getting way too tanky for building like glacial shrouds and random Roa stuff like that. With that gone, I think it does change the complexion of his tankiness a little bit.
His health
I need to
is
see the
way
math,
bigger
right?
now too.
If he's actually
right here,
if I see the numbers, but I can't tell if it's better or worse just based off of the eye test right there, right? After running the numbers, I agree that if he's basically as strong and does as much damage without the conversion pass and with all the things and it's just the grounded, I think that would actually be enough to make Singed a powerful pick.
I mean, he gains 70 health at level 1 now, and his health is 8 per level, and then like his passive I think is actually insane. If you get within 225 range, you get 20% bonus move speed for 2 seconds.
But how much health did he get from like a Righteous Glory Roa build in the past?
Yeah, I can't tell you exactly that, but like
so it's
you also need to build less mana. That's part of the big thing, is that you can build more pure tanky items because everything costs less mana now.
You're making everything sound insane, though. I don't think that everything is insane. I do think that the Singe buffs are very
but
big.
these are my point is that these are not like, ooh,
you're saying a lot of them are disruptive.
Exactly. Singe didn't just gain like, ooh, 2 damage on his Q or something like that. It's like, oh, Singe is now a different champion. I wonder if he's good.
It's mostly the Garen ones I was.
The Garen one I actually think is pretty big.
You
think we'll see Garen in Pro?
I think he'll be strong, but
probably not.
I don't think.
But I think his solo queue, I think he could be really good.
He's just too simple of a champion.
I think Garen. I think he's definitely buffed. I'm gonna play him. I always like playing Garen.
Yeah, the biggest things were just how I feel. The Bramble Vest and Gobi Bramble Vest. There you go. And the lethality changes, I think, just change because anytime you do itemization changes, it changes the landscape of the meta. It changes the game. It changes which champions can be effective, both as and against. So I think that's why I think it's really big. But I think we're good to keep it moving now, are we? Or do you guys want to talk about it?
We didn't really get to play much solo queue. I played Maokai because I think he's busted. Like, this is not in the patch, but if we're talking about pro meta, I think Maokai's going into
our
pro.
solo queue experiences.
Yeah, we got to play that before we even went over to Rift Rivals because we were all hyped up on Cinderhawks.
No, it's really strong.
Trying everybody out, yeah.
I think we'll see pro junglers playing Maokai. His jungle clear is fast, and his ganks are super good.
Also because we told all the European junglers to start playing it. When we were over there, we're like,
try.
Mike Young played it as well on stream, so there you go. That's the seal of approval.
It's basically meta.
I've actually been playing it some top as well, and it actually seems really strong top. Like, so yeah, there's still gonna be matchups that you don't want.
Bramble Vest is actually gonna hurt him a lot.
Yeah, it could.
Honestly, because if it applies on the first auto attack, which I'm not.
The whole point of it is
do you know if Bramble Vest is on the first hit it reduces?
The whole point of it is that.
So the Maokai late game healing is like 700 per auto attack, and a lot of times is if you're peeling a tank who's going to have a Bramble Vest for the most part. If it is an OP item, that'll actually hurt Maokai.
That's fair. That could definitely be a pretty big difference. But I also think his late game case of against AD carries and stuff that can be pretty strong. And there's some matchups where he can abuse it pretty heavily in lane. Yeah. But this is a champion that just keeps getting buffed because no one wanted to play him since the rework. And sometimes I feel like so if a rework or whatever, people just like deem it crap, whether it is or not. You have to do so much to get it back into the meta because people will not try a champion again. They play Maokai once, like, all right, ultimate is trash, champion sucks, never playing him again. And so sometimes these champions get buffed, I think over buffed. And I think that Maokai is approaching that level. Like I actually think his His engages are really good. Like when you get a Righteous Glory on this guy, you can just like roam and throw your ult over a wall, and you're essentially like zoning them either away from it or into it, right? Like you can come behind and they have to run into this thing, or they can run away from you and they run to this route. Like it goes up to like I think it's 2.5 seconds.
I like
or
throwing
something.
it sideways as you're sieging a turret.
Yeah,
right, because that just cuts off the turret for them as safe terrain.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think
Maokai's
he's
cool.
gonna be good.
Yeah. I also was playing Hecarim still, and now that the Ghost Blade was changed to have even more out of combat move speed, I might try that. But I think if I'm going to try one of the lethality items, I'm going to build somebody around Duskblade as well for solo queue. So definitely expect to see a lot more of those in solo queue.
You guys been playing anything else? Any new picks you think are going to be good besides that? Or are you still on pretty much just the
you just talked me into
tanks?
Garen, so I'm bringing Garen
That's
out
all
of the
he's
jungle.
thinking now.
I'm actually
spinning around.
I'm
all
actually
the
pretty
time.
excited to try a lot of these new ones later today.
A champion I can play in the top lane.
I gotta be honest. I saw a bunch of changes to Garen, and I was like, boring champion. I'm not even reading those.
Those are big buffs. Those are big buffs.
They are big, man.
Yeah.
I know that they're
Anyway.
big buffs, but unless you change the way that you play that character, I'm not gonna play that character.
I'll convert you, Kobe.
I'm not gonna play that character. So here's
you
the
don't play
is
him
really
after I
fun.
kill you.
This
10 times
actually
in a
brings
row.
up a topic I kind of wanted to touch on. And I forgot because you were talking so long.
Okay.
Because you were talking about how when they buff champions into viability, basically they haven't, nobody plays X champion.
Yeah.
If nobody plays X champion because it's not a very fun champion to play, my problem with that style of buffing and buffing it until people play it is that, okay, eventually people are going to play as champion because they like to win, but they're not going to like playing the champion, and it's just going to be overly buffed. Like that's a very
I mean, you have to make
be
the
very
champion
cautious about
fun
that
as well.
Yeah,
right?
you can't just like nobody's playing. Garen is a pretty good example. I don't want to call out names, but like nobody's playing X champion, and then buff them all the way up to so the winners want to play him.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's not like an ideal way to do it, but it's also one of the things where sometimes a champion just like falls to the wayside so hard, right? Like even if they are fun, like Bard, I think is an example where I think it was done. It was cool that it happened because Bard came out and it was so trash. It was like 30-something% win rate. People tried like, this champion sucks. I don't want to play it. And Bard player went down the dumpster. And like this champion got a bunch of buffs. It starts to come back in and it's super fun. And you can then like appropriately balance it and you can reintroduce it. Yeah, I agree with some of those champions. But I mean, I feel the same about Nunu and you guys are all about that.
Yeah.
Like that champion is just an I want to win. That's not a fun champion.
This is the other thing I was going to say is that also people enjoy different champions.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of people that do enjoy like Jat playing Garen and love
fun
that style. So
I used to love old Gangplank. I was actually really sad when they did the rework. I actually don't like new Gangplank at all. Even though he's a more cool champion. I understand he's more skillful. But can you stand at a bush at level 1 and cheese him?
Exactly.
No, you
if
cannot.
Garen suddenly had skill shots, it'll be a whole different experience.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's time to move on finally to North American LCS. We said we'd get to it. Rift Rivals teams versus non-Rift Rival teams. Advantages or disadvantages of going to Rift Rivals and how it's going to impact them. I think the first team we should talk about is Phoenix 1 because they went 4-2 in the group stage of Rift Rivals and they are 3-7 in the North American LCS. Plus they play TSM first up back. So what are we expecting?
Aren't they like 3-2 though since they got Mike Young, something like that? 3-3. Okay, so so it's like they've been on an upswing. To be fair, I actually say that going Rift Rivals is a disadvantage. I think that the lost scrims and stuff from going there, as far as like travel days and jet lag and this sort of stuff, I actually think that the teams that did not go will have more of a jump on the patch. So like it doesn't mean that TSM is going to suck or something, but like I would actually give the edge to CLG, who just gets to chill at home, have way more scrims. They have their scrim partners and just really heavily prepare for this next week. Because even if you say I'm just going to treat Rift Rivals as a scrim week, the fans will not. So you have to take it more seriously, right? Like Double talked about, he felt way more pressure playing there than he did even for NA LCS.
Exactly. And I do agree with all the points. Like, yes, traveling over there sucked. It sucked for us. Like the short turnaround times, the jet lag, the sickness, all those things are definitely takeaways. And that's like a cost to going to Rift Rivals. I do think that both TSM and Phoenix 1 did improve over there though.
Yeah.
And to the point of like, oh, even if you treat it like scrims over there, I think it was even beneficial to kind of change up the mentality, right?
And confidence-wise,
if you're in the same, system basically every single week and you're just used to, okay, scrims now, okay, LCS now, okay, scrims now, Like injecting some extra hyper competitiveness and an intense week like that into your practice can definitely, change the way a team plays. And it looks like it has for the better for some of the teams that went over there. So even though there are all these costs, there are actually some definite benefits. That being said, people are going to bring up the arguments of European teams didn't even provide that good practice.
Basically, what you were trying to blame us for beforehand, and Phoenix won. I mean, European teams, like if they're scrimming challenger teams, clearly.
Yeah, they said it was going to be a lose-lose for Europe going into this.
There's nothing they possibly gain from this aside from the respect of their peers and Europe in general. Anyway, I want to double down on that. Phoenix won. I think they're going to gain. I think they gained a lot of confidence from that. And I think that's incredibly important to that because we should never underestimate how hard it is to lose as a pro team and how hard on you to lose and how that puts you into a negative spiral. And they hadn't turned it around in NA yet, and they did turn it around in EU. So I feel like now their expectations of themselves are way higher, and we're kind of going to have to see that play out. But I think for them, it's a positive experience because they got all of that exposure. They got all that extra experience for even like playing with Mike Yannick Special, who they'd only had a few weeks with, and the intensity of the games, even though it's not the same type of learning you'd have in practice, it's mainly just the execution of the things he practiced, but they showed how much they have grown, and I think I have a hard time imagining them not making playoffs at this point, even though they only have 3 wins and they still have to play TSM.
I think the loser out of the 3 is certainly C9 because TSM won, so that's exciting. P1 got a lot of recognition, performed well. C9 did the worst of the 3 teams. I know like Sneaky and a lot of their players are super sick. Like they can't even talk still apparently. Like they haven't got their voices back, so like they're really sick. So they're probably gonna be on a downtrend. My question for you guys is like, given the pros and the cons and stuff, who comes out on top, right? Like who is now the best team coming into the next week? Is it CLG? Is it TSM?
TSM, I think. I think it's TSM based on that. They crushed Europe. They had already beaten they beat Immortals. They beat Immortals coming in. They've beaten CLG a few times. So I think TSM kind of are the favorites. I did want to say one more thing though about like C9 getting sick and how they come out the weakest of that. There is something to learning how to deal with international travel.
Yeah.
Contracts, I believe this was his first international event and his first time traveling internationally or even playing on like that high pressure of a stage. So
like, he played really well. He actually stood out.
He went to Canada, I guess, if that does that count?
Yeah, that counts. But I mean, no, I don't count that. I feel like it's his first intercontinental event.
Contracts was great though, just as an aside.
Contracts played great.
He actually was really good.
But like we complained about our turnaround or whatever for that. We left Monday, we landed Tuesday, we started casting Wednesday. But I felt like I was able to do it because I've traveled internationally so many times before. I know when to sleep. I know when to caffeinate to stay up. I know when to, take melatonin to try and go in bed to sleep better. And I have improved my ability to perform during international travel. And C9 like messed that up, and they're going to feel terrible, and they're going to lose more games when they come back.
To be fair,
but I think that experience can help.
Experience helps a lot. I agree with you there. But also, to be fair, my level of stress when I'm going to cast an international event versus my level of stress when I was going to play at like BlizzCon or something is like so different, like astronomically different. I'm not like laying awake thinking like my whole year is gone if I lose. You know what I mean? Like,
but like the first time you had to travel to Europe to play,
it was way worse
versus the fifth time.
I agree completely. I agree completely with that point, but I also just think that there's always so much more stress for the players than I think for the casters. Yes, there's pressure to like have a good cast and things like this, and you can get criticism or whatever. But I think it's a much different level than the players have.
Like, I sleep easy now that I'm a caster and not playing.
I don't think anyone's going to argue.
So that's all I'm saying is that's like you could be experienced, but you still be stressed out of your mind and not be like.
I don't think anyone's even making that point or going to argue with you on that one.
All I'm saying is, you could be on your 100th international tournament and still have a sleepless night because you're stressed.
Yeah. Also, like, Sneaky was one of the guys that got super sick, and too bad for him. There's nothing to learn. Like, don't get sick.
Yeah, that sucks.
He's been to international events, a ton of international events. And it's just like
5 years.
Unlucky.
Take more vitamin C.
Sleep better. Don't shake hands. Let's just preview Phoenix 1 TSM for the end of the NA LCS.
Oh, right? Baby.
Who will win?
This is actually the finals of Rift Rivals.
Yeah, the 2 best teams. This should have been the finals. Just redo the tournament, right? It's NA versus NA in the European studio. It'll be super hype. Yeah, TSM was 5-1 in groups. Phoenix 1 was 4-2 in groups.
I still say TSM. My question, I think TSM wins. I think that they looked like a more complete team, and I think that when you looked at their losses, P1 both their losses I want to say were to Fnatic, and it actually felt like they should lose those games. I think when I look at TSM's one loss, it was to UOL. That was a game that they were quite ahead. Yes, maybe they get outscaled and stuff, but it was off of one really great team fight from UOL. I just felt like TSM looked like the most complete team throughout the whole tournament. I think that they looked the best coming out of group stage. They looked incredible in the finals. So I think they are the stronger team right now. My question is kind of, so people are super hyped on Phoenix 1 right now, right? Does that hype just go away if they just get slammed by TSM and go 0-2 this weekend?
The hype only goes away if they bench Mike Young forever.
Yeah.
If Mike Young plays, it's here.
I actually think they've built up enough. They have enough hype in the bank that they can spend some of it and go 0-2 this week.
They can have a night out on town.
Yeah, good old hype.
It's just if they lose, 4 matches in a row, I feel like it would die. I think they're actually fully capable of making an excuse for an 0-2 week. They have to play TSM. They're jet lagged.
Any team that comes back.
Yeah, any team that comes back gets the first week. But it's after that they're going to start losing their hype and they're going to spend all their hype bank.
Yeah, I'm actually more excited to see both of those two teams play against the other North American LCS teams than even play against each other. Because as you said, I think pretty much everybody is favoring TSM in whatever match they would have right now. And I'm super curious to see CLG,
Me too.
Immortals, these
And
top,
this is the first time
other,
on 7-13.
Yeah, these other top teams get a crack at the guys that went to Rift Rivals.
And on the new patch, right? I kind of, that slipped my mind. The 7-13 was the first time we saw that at Rift
How
Rivals.
Did it slip your mind? It's the this patch.
Yeah, well, that's 7-14, Kobe. Get it correct, bro. But maybe some of these teams have prepared some of the stuff, right? Like we talked about Maokai Jungle and stuff. Maybe Smithy has been plugging away, practicing that Maokai Jungle or his Nunu or whatever, like the tank junglers. They get more time to actually think through the meta and have had essentially 2 weeks almost now of scrims on this patch to be able to show us what they think is the best. So it actually could be much different theoretically from what we've seen at Rift Rivals, and maybe they are a step ahead, right? That's something that we'll have to find out, which would be really cool.
I'm hoping it changes a little bit. And before we get into Twitter questions, I want to give us one last chance. We didn't do much of it in Europe. How do you want to gloat about NA's victory?
Oh man, I'm taking the high road. You guys can do whatever you want.
It's going to be the same as when you're on an analyst desk with a bunch of sad
the high road.
Well,
I already got it. I say that, but I already burned. I already got some burnt in there.
Yeah,
anyway,
he's already got us.
We don't get many wins, so I feel like it's important to revel in the glory for a small amount of time.
I mean, I don't really think I need to say anything. I think they proved it for us, right? It's one of those things where I would want to gloat if people were still debating it. Everyone has just accepted that NA is greater than the EU.
Kind of are. They're making excuses and stuff. All right, go Jet.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if you guys had anything else. I'm happy. I'm actually just really happy with the performance of the North American teams. But the problem for me is we've been happy before, and it totally backfired. There's been so many times. Exactly. There's been so many times where we've seen NA as this team that can do great things. It happened last year after CLG finished second at MSI. It's just the check-in point was Worlds, not Rift Rivals. So I feel like this is just another one of those check-in points, and hopefully it's closer to Worlds. It'll happen again. But I want to actually feel revealed until we get multiple teams out of group stages at Worlds.
Sweet. Twitter questions. Let's go. We got David Peterly. He's been a regular for questions. Peterly? I think it's Peterly.
Okay.
That's what I'm going with.
You're the expert.
You guys go back and forth on his name every single time, too.
My boy David is cool with it, okay? Keep sending in the questions.
Yeah.
Anyway, at what point will all have too many champions in relation to balance, ban system, complexity, competitive viability, design, etc.? So that's a pretty complex question. What do you think?
Yeah, it is, because especially to me, even the first problem would come up our game as far as functioning with new players, because it's more of an issue with new players rather than competitive. Having that many champions. So I think that the team across the street would come up with that problem first.
Yeah.
As far as the general player base and new players, and how to get around continually adding champions like this. Before we had a problem with competitive, because competitive, it's your job, you play all the time. Everybody has had every single rune and every single champion for years now. So
yeah, I mean, if we're talking about competitive viability, I think it's a really unique question, and I feel like we're really close to the max, if not over it, right? Because and it depends what type of game we want to see. You could have 300 champions and still have a healthy competitive game as long as no option is overpowered to each other. But the way I see it is, have you guys seen like the champion subclasses where you have like 2 different types of tanks, like wardens and vanguards, or like 2 different types of mages? So we're at this point now where we're kind of bucketing champions. Oh, I want a physical damage, split pushing top laner. How many of those are there, right? And if we're in these buckets where there's like 2 or 3, then that doesn't necessarily affect the competitive viability in the current ban system, because if you want to stop that strategy from happening, you can actually ban it. But if we get to a point where you say, I want a physical top, like split pushing melee top, and there's 12 of them, right? And every bucket is that big, then bans no longer matter because there's too many similar bucketed champions in a system.
They do if you have 50 bans.
Right? And then that's just dumb.
Can't wait for the 50 ban system. That'll be great.
I can't wait for the 50 ban system.
Hour 3 of the bans.
Currently, I feel like the buckets aren't actually that big, and we have counter picks that exist within a lot of those buckets. So in that sense, we're in a pretty healthy system right now, and I think we can still go up a little bit.
Ban a whole bucket then.
There you go.
You get 3 bucket bans.
You get bucket bans. I will ban,
ban the assassin bucket.
They're grouped. They're grouped that, or you can ban out like Ionians or some shit.
By the lore. All right, that's great. But
ban out countries.
The only thing I will say is I don't think we're ever like, I mean, I don't actually know, right? But like the way I see it is it's going to be shifted over time, probably less towards new champions and more towards reworking and fixing the champions that we already have, as they have kind of done, right? Because you can get to a point where all the champions are really cool, and that'd be great. But you want one more point? Or
well, I mean, that just brings up more questions of like, the business model for the actual game. Then where does that go? Because new champions is a big part of it. And you can't. I don't know if you could rely purely on cosmetics. Not release new champions.
New champions will probably always come out, right? Anyway, next question is from Edward Jerry, the Fantasy G. He asked, looking back at NA's performance over Rift Rivals, do you think P1 could bring... Oh, we already kind of talked about that one.
Yes, I think they can bring the momentum back.
All right.
C9 and TSM did not get extra practice, though, as the end of that question. But yeah, we pretty much covered that. Next one, Mr. Extion. What do you think best determines a team's skill? Full build team fight or closing the game before 30 minutes?
I mean, that's like a really hard question, because I think that there can be different skill sets, right? Like, I think that being able to close the game pre 30 minutes is more impressive. I think that is a more difficult thing to do than it is to actually just win a team fight. At the end of the game, like full build. Yes, those team fights do require a lot of skill and stuff too, but I think that there's so many more like correct decisions you have to make to like close out a game really fast than there are to just win the one team fight late game.
Yeah, I mean they're just different skills within the game. All the skills that do contribute to you destroying the Nexus. Like that's the same problem I had with like using tiebreaker rules as times for people's wins. Some strategies obviously built around lane dominant champions, winning the early game, and then that is a very important skill to have to be able to end that game early and continue your snowball and not lose a team fight to the scaling team. And then it makes the job super easy for the scaling team or whatever. Anyways, those different scenarios.
I mean, if you're trying to classify teams from a spectrum of like fast teams to scaling teams, SKT, I think, falls on the scaling team spectrum, and they're the greatest team of all time. So I really don't think closing a game pre 30 minutes is like a great indicator of a team skill, but it's more about like how they play the map and how they play specifically to the win conditions of their team composition, which is the big thing. Last question from Frederick White. Do you guys think the game should be balanced more around pro play or normal player base?
I think this is one of those things where it has to be a mix, right? Like at the end of the day, I could be a purist and I should be like, it should be 100% about pro play. But if everyone stops playing the game, pro play doesn't happen anymore. You have to actually like have it at a place where some champions they're tuning things that are more towards pro play, but ideally it should always be a mix, right? Like if something is dominating in pro play but it's not as good in solo queue, you want to find a way to balance it that is attacking the specific thing that is pros are utilizing more than the average player is utilizing.
Yeah, I actually really like the current strategy that the balance team does, where they balance for both and they attack the outliers.
Yeah.
So if there's a champion that's super good and competitive and the kit really fits that, it's basically just bad for the majority of the player base, but then there's still 127 other champions.
The meta feels pretty damn good right now, I think.
Yeah.
Till Bramble.
And that's one positive. That's one positive of having so many champions. We can have champions that will never see the light of competitive play. Amumu has not been played in competitive in years, yet always so good for the majority of the player base.
53% win rate.
These more simplistic champions that we're talking about, that's why Garen and stuff like this exists.
Those are my champions.
And
he's like, those are my people.
And on the other side, there are ones that are pick ban 100% in competitive, yet are like 35% win rate for most people, like the old Azir, Rise.
Rise
those
is like 40% win rate in solo queue. It still gets picked. I think that champion sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's bad and competitive at this point, but that's a totally different discussion.
It's important to have a spectrum so that when I watch a pro game, I can see somebody perform an amazing feat that I can't perform and be like, I want to get to that level. Exactly.
And that's why I think it's also really cool to have varying complexity of champions, right? Because it's like
what I just said.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you guys very much for the question. That does it for this week's episode of The Dive. Make sure you can check us out on YouTube. We're also on SoundCloud, iTunes, a bunch of other SoundCloud podcast
I heard
platforms.
we're on Spotify UK or something.
I heard that.
We're in there. That's number. That's one.
Not the US one, but UK or something.
To find it, I found if I look for it on iTunes, search The Dive LOL is the big thing because that's our hashtag. That's how we're identified on all these platforms. And we'll probably be there if you just search for it.
Probably.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Perhaps. Also, keep sending us questions on Twitter. Otherwise, our producers are going to have to come up with them, and our producers suck. So make sure
they come up with this or that slides every week. I feel like they're fine.
But we don't want to overburden them, right?
Keep them
focused. Yeah.
All right. Remember, NA LCS will be back in business this Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific time. Counterlogic Gaming takes on FlyQuest.
Let's go.
Let's go.